St. Vincent, Annie Clark, one of the more beloved art pop, art rock, whatever you want to label her as, artists of the past 10 years, maybe even longer if you go back to her earliest stuff. But I think what put her on the map the most was Strange Mercy, which you can definitely understand why. It has some of most recognizable tracks on there. Some really good tracks overall on that album are featured there too. I don't think it's her best album, like holistically. In fact, I would rank a few albums above it. Personally, I think Self-Titled would go above it. I think Self-Titled might be her most fully distinct album, just some of her most recognizable songs ever, some of her best songs ever, and Actor as well. I think Actor is actually her best album. So yeah, I mean, Strange Mercy, while as solid as it is, isn't the first St. Vincent album I'm drawn to. And now, 10 years after that album, Strange Mercy, we have Daddy's Home. Daddy's Home is here. Daddy is home. Daddy. Which has been getting some really positive reviews thus far, which you can totally understand why. I think once again, it's not only, St. Vincent doing what she does best, but I think after Mass Seduction, which a lot of people considered a bit of a letdown, I can certainly understand why this album is probably people making up for the disappointment there. Like, sometimes if you're just so disappointed by a previous album, you might subconsciously overrate the next one. I kind of think people did that with The Strokes last year, The New Abnormal. Like, I think people were so disappointed by their recent output that, people just went really overboard with the praise, even though, it wasn't that big of a step up, really. Like, it wasn't that, yeah. And it's not to say that I would never do that. I probably have subconsciously done that in the past too. But, I think there is something to be said about that. And then when you kind of let time pass, you might view an album with different eyes, a different lens or something like that. But regardless, I think this new album from St. Vincent is a bit of a confusing one for me. I can't decide where I fall on the fence, to be honest, with this one. There are elements that I think are really fantastic. Obviously, I think St. Vincent usually brings fantastic elements to every table she sits on, but there are also elements that I just don't really find that enamoring or that interesting or that exciting, so it ends up being a bit of a mixed listen. I think the way this album is set up with Pay Your Way in Pain is kind of batshit and almost makes no sense. This really made, I think, a lot of people think this album was going to be her most wackiest, her bizarrest, if that's even a word, her craziest album to date, because this track is just madness. I'm still not sure if it fully works even after multiple listens of this album. I still feel the same way after I initially reacted to it on this channel. I'm still just scratching my head after every listen. But the thing is that it just doesn't even fit the vibe of the album. Like, the track immediately after this is just there to undo what this track did. It's kind of weird. To start as Kate Bush on acid, to then going to a more kind of ethereal, I guess, atmospheric track that just feels like you're swaying in the wind. It's just quite jarring, and I still don't really get the artistic intent behind doing that. But oh my god, Down and Out Downtown is fantastic. This is probably my favorite track here. Just absolutely lovely. Honestly, love the guitar on this track. Her vocals are stellar. Some of her best vocals to date, really. Just think the whole thing is sold incredibly well, and it just has that classic vintage feel that St. Vincent has in her music, and she slows things down, but she's still got a really nice melody. She's still singing really well too. There's just that feeling that you get from a lot of the slower songs from St. Vincent on this track, and yet it just feels heightened a little bit. I think it's the vocal performance that really brings this one home. And then you've got, you know, more dibble dabbling in other styles across the album. You know, Daddy's Home, that kind of feels like this slacker, laid back psych rock jam thing. It's okay, not really that remarkable. Like, you know, it's not one track that I hear and think, wow, this is amazing or anything like that. It just kind of fizzles out for some reason. I can't pick out why it does that for me. Living the Dream as well, it does a similar thing. It just feels really flat. There's not really that great of a melody to carry the song. The vocals are nowhere near as strong as they were on like Down and Out Downtown. So I just feel like it's missing something completely, and it just feels totally unremarkable. We get a few songs like this, I think, where Somebody Like Me, for example, does the typical like slow moving thing that I think St. Vincent does on quite a few of her tracks that, you know, have this vibe. But I don't know, it just doesn't really impact me that much. Like, sure, there is a bit more of a momentum to this one, but yeah, once it's finished, I'm kind of ready to move on. Candy Darling, which comes pretty much at the end of the album, just feels so similar to Prince Johnny. Like, listening to this track is so weird because I just immediately get Prince Johnny vibes. And again, that's another track that does that slow moving St. Vincent thing. And yet this one is, you know, the worst offender for it, where it actually just sounds almost identical to a song we've heard from her before. The vocal melody, just the instrumental, just something about it just reminds me too much of that song. I guess while we're moving along with things that I'm not too keen on, you do have these 3 interludes that are basically just humming, and I don't know, man, what is the point of these songs? Like, what is the point? I mean, they're not literally just humming. I think you can make out some of the words she says, and when you pull up the lyrics, she's obviously singing. But I don't know, interludes at the best of times can feel a bit, oh, did we really need that? But this is just a perfect example of like, oh yeah, we didn't really need that, did we? Now there are 2 other tracks that I want to highlight as being really good. Down, oh my god, the backing vocals are so good here. There needs to be more of this in this album, like just so good. And then it's got this like rock sensibility to it as well. It just feels like a really well put together rock jam that's obviously like calling back to the 70s, but in such a great way. Honestly, I think this track really sells it, and I think she doesn't go too flashy either. It's not like, you know, the guitars are right in your face or anything like that. The drums aren't like it doesn't need to be like that. She just keeps it cool, calm, very tasteful, and she gets the job done. And I think this is what her best asset is. Just these tracks that go rocky, but they're not too like, you know, rocky, and she just really sells it. Not that you can't make like rocky jams. Obviously you can, there'd be nothing wrong with that, but I just think she does it in a way that makes it really catchy and really well put together. And I think she just is in her element when she does songs like this. At the Holiday Party is another track I'd like too. It does feel like early 70s rock. I think the gospelish ending should have come earlier. I think this is a really great part of the track, kind of like Down, where the backing vocals start coming through and they sound great. I just think she probably should have utilized this a bit more on the album, but particularly on this track, she should have just brought it in sooner, I think. Similarly with My Baby Wants a Baby, where the ending has such a great progression into this rocky jam once again, just that rockiness coming through, but I think it could have come earlier, because prior to that, we're getting some really swanky guitar playing, but the lyrics just kind of get a bit redundant. You know, my baby wants this, my baby wants that, this, that, and the other. I think, yeah, just cut that bit down to a few lines and get to this progression that you get at the end quicker. Conflicted feelings all around, I think. Just an album that has potential to really resonate with me and then just misses the mark quite a few times. And I don't know, I think, like I say, there are some great songs here, and perhaps even some of her best. Down and Out Downtown and the other track Down, really are some of her best. That's my opinion anyway. Perhaps you would have a different favourite track, but yeah, like I say, the confusing introduction to this album that doesn't really go anywhere in terms of like the aesthetic or the sound. Like if she'd carried this on, it might have made more sense as having this as an introduction, but this track sticks out like a sore thumb to me. It wasn't that great anyway, and the rest after that just fizzles in places but pops in others. Just kind of a bit of a mixed one for me. I think I'm going to go 5.5 out of 10, which I know is probably not going to go down too well with her biggest fans. I know she's got a dedicated fan base, but hopefully you understand where my, reservations come from, because like I say, I think there were some moments here that really, really struck a chord with me, but just a lot of others that just didn't. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the new St. Vincent Daddy's Home. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching this review. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you had a good day as well. And subscribe if you have not already. Goodbye. See you later. Goodbye.